I think one of the things that I learnt with the body confidence business that I had was that I wasn't listening to my intuition. Everything was telling me that this wasn't the right thing for me to be doing. Even writing a social media post felt like such hard work. Whereas now I'll be having my breakfast and I'll write a post in my head. The difference is enormous when you are in that flow, when you are where you are meant to be. Everything in my intuition was telling me I wasn't in the right place, but I just wasn't listening.
Hello and welcome to the Driven Female Entrepreneur Podcast. I'm your host, Melitta Campbell, award-winning business coach, value whisperer, and founder of the Dream Clients Blueprint, your step-by-step guide to attracting more of your perfect fit clients and enjoying your dream impact, income, and lifestyle. To help you start attracting more clients today and learn how to sell without selling, I've created an on-demand training for you that you can follow for free by visiting melittacampbell.com/training. On this show each week, I bring you practical advice and tried and tested techniques through my own experiences and those of other successful women in business. Our goal is to help you dream bigger and confidently achieve more in your business and in life. This week, I've invited Sally Jackson onto the show. She's a divorce coach with multiple businesses and careers to her name before her latest evolution. When we met recently, I was impressed by the way Sally has navigated and learned from her various experiences and how she helps women see that what can often be the most traumatic time in their lives can become an opportunity to build resilience, trust, self-belief, and design a better future. I saw so many parallels between her work today and the rollercoaster ride of entrepreneurship that I couldn't wait for her to come on the show and share her lessons and insights with you. But get ready, there are so many aha moments coming up for you. Hi, Sally, it's great to have you with us on the show today.
Hi, it's lovely to be with you.
And we had a conversation recently and I knew I just had to invite you onto the show because I think you've had such a varied background, followed your heart, followed expectation, done everything that a lot of the listeners have done. And in those moments where we're questioning ourselves, have we done the right thing? What do we do next? I think your story, there's so much wisdom locked within that story. So I'm really excited that you're here sharing it with us. And recently in the Action Networking event, which I have every month to go with the show, it's where the listeners can come and meet each other live and share successes and challenges and ideas and things. And often in that event, and certainly in the last one, there is always this big question of like, how do we manage everything? How do we be a great mum? How do we look after our parents? How do we manage our part-time job? And all of these things and still be a successful business owner. And it isn't easy, but there are definitely things we can put in place to make us feel better going through that process, feeling stronger and more accomplished, and giving ourselves permission that there is going to be times when it won't all come together, and that's okay too. So as I said, I know that your story is going to be really speaking to a lot of these challenges. So I'm excited for our conversation.
Thank you. And thank you so much for inviting me. Yeah, I've definitely been hearing that as a theme, listening to business owners coming out of the summer. A lot of people were saying, I just didn't feel like I was either fully in my business or fully with the family. In fact, I wasn't doing a good job of either. A lot of frustration, a lot of disappointment. So that's definitely a recurring theme I've heard.
Yeah, I think it's something we all experience. And so it's important to have that resilience and be able to manage that process. But we'll get to that. First, I would love it if you could share a little bit of your story. How did you get to do what you do today? And maybe you can give us a little introduction to what that is, because that in itself is fascinating.
So yes, thank you. I'm Sally Jackson. My business is Sally Jackson Coaching, and I'm a divorce coach. And a lot of people don't know what a divorce coach is. But essentially, I started my business because of my own acrimonious divorce. It was actually my solicitor who said to me, Sally, you'd make a great divorce coach. Which, seriously, I was already a coach. I was a health coach. And then for a short while, I was a body confidence coach for brides. But divorce coaching for me was just the perfect way to use all my expertise. I'm a nurse by background. I'd been a menopause nurse specialist. I spent 10 years at the University of Cambridge working with clinicians and GPs on complex communication, navigating conflict. I'm also a volunteer grief support worker. And then finally, I trained with the Divorce Coaching Academy. So it was just the perfect way, really, to bring together all that expertise. And as a divorce coach, I help midlife women and couples to end their relationship with dignity and hope. Simply put, I help them get through divorce in one piece. Women come to me when they're beginning to think about a divorce, or perhaps already partway through one, and they need help because they're totally overwhelmed, not just with the process of divorce itself, but also with all the emotions of it. And every decision weighs them down and they just lose their sense of self. And that might be because they've actually given up their career to bring up their family, and so they've lost their sense of purpose, and suddenly they find themselves on their own and perhaps faced with needing to go back to work. Or it might be that they've been, reliant on their spouse in a sort of codependent way. Or it may be that they've been in an abusive relationship and undermined, and they don't trust their own judgment anymore. And, ending any relationship, even one that's gone bad, is a really traumatic process. I mean, I ended mine after 37 years, and I was so shocked at the level of trauma that I experienced. And, it got to the point where I was challenging myself. If you get out of bed today and you make your bed, you've done really well. It can be really, really undermining. You may not love your spouse. In fact, you may hate them, but you worry about hurting them, or it may be that you're grieving the loss of that relationship. And particularly in my case, it was the future that we'd planned together. We'd been working hard most of our lives, supporting our children to do what they wanted to do, fulfilling the roles that we had chosen to take on, because we were going to have this retirement together, and we were going to travel, and we were going to do all these things. And suddenly that's all gone. So what that means is when you're in that emotional state, you're really quite paralyzed in terms of decision making at a time when you need to make those life-changing decisions. In fact, some of my clients, I will say to them, so what music do you like? And they can't even tell me what music they like. They've been so codependent for so long. So the idea that they're going to be able to make life-changing decisions that are in tune with their desires and their values and their needs, it's just bizarre, really, when I think that people go to their lawyers when they're in that state, and then their lawyers want them to make that decision, and they just can't. So I go back to basics with them. I work with them to discover who they are, what they need, what they want from their future. And this is usually financially, emotionally, practically, getting them to have a good support team around them. Sometimes we have to solve, really big problems like worrying about where they're going to live, or we might be working on ways that they can build a better relationship with their teenage children, or how to look after themselves better. Quite often, divorce is the first time that looking after your well-being is no longer an option. You have to do it, or you really will struggle to get through it. So I'm just not helping them get through their divorce in one piece. I'm helping them to build stronger foundations for the next exciting stage of their life.
Such important work, and so many facets of your work that I wouldn't have considered, actually. The whole rebuilding your identity aspect. But as you were going through that, I thought there's so many parallels with building your own business, because it's the first time you've gone out on your own, the first time you've had to learn certain skills, and the well-being part is so essential, because if you're not fit and well and healthy and strong and focused, then you're not going to do well in your business either. And this idea of you've made these plans and then something changes and that's no longer possible for you, so you have to pivot and change. So I'd love to come to some of your ideas about how do you build that resilience, how do you start to find out who you really are, because of course that's the start point in your business, that your business, particularly in the early days, is you. So you are the brand, you are the face of the business. So finding that information is really critical. But before we kind of dig into some of that, maybe one thing that we discussed before, but you didn't mention just then, well, you touched on it very briefly. And I think I know a lot of the listeners of the show are going through midlife and all the changes that that brings along with it as well. Is there something that you've noticed is different about how women in their midlife, particularly those who are going through the perimenopause or the menopause, need to think about their well-being and developing that resilience going forward?
Oh, definitely, definitely. I think if you don't make space for wellness, you make space for illness. That's the reality at this point in your life, I think. And what I mean by that is things like having a good sleep routine. Our sleep, particularly during the menopause, is absolutely critical. So if you are somebody who is running your own business or maybe in a corporate role, and because at this point in our careers, we're senior, aren't we? We have a lot of responsibility. And it's so easy to push yourself harder and to do that work at the weekends and squeeze out that time for yourself and work until 11, 12 o'clock at night, and then expect yourself to be able to get up at 6. And you need your sleep. Your sleep is restorative. I think if you said to me, what is your number one tip for women going through that stage of life? I would say it's your sleep.
Mm. So what does it take to get a good night's sleep? I know in theory it sounds great, but is there anything in particular that helps protect a good night's sleep or helps us manage that?
Well, I mean, there's so many things, and I think you can Google sleep hygiene, and there's all sorts of things on there. But I think the basics are really thinking about: are you well hydrated during the day? That's a key one. Are you making sure that you're not having caffeine drinks, dark chocolate late at night? Probably not a lot of wine, because that can really disturb your sleep. So you're not going to get into that deep sleep, or you're going to wake perhaps a few hours after you've gone off to sleep. And then obviously things like your blue light. And then something that I found hugely helpful when I was actually going through my divorce was to actually choose a bedtime story, because I found that reading, I just couldn't focus. But a bedtime story that I listened to the same one every night, and that really helped me to get off. So having something that you feel comfortable with. I have a client who actually goes to sleep listening to the QVC. It doesn't matter what it is, as long as it gets you off to sleep.
Yeah.
And then I think it's things about what works for you. So is it having a warm bath before you go to bed? Is it having a milky drink? Whatever it is that works for you to quieten your mind. And then having some nice practices that mean that the last thing you think about is something really good. So maybe doing your gratitudes before you go to sleep. Any and all of those things can help.
I'm devastated. I love my dark chocolate in the evening. Anytime I can have some without the kids saying, can we have some too?
But I mean, if it doesn't impact your sleep, that's fine. Because the thing is, we're all so different.
I'll have to test it and see. So let's start with the identity part, because that's a cool part of what you do. I'm sure that's something that, well, is that something that has to come first when someone's coming out of divorce, refinding who they are?
So when I work with my clients, as many coaches, I will always let my clients bring whatever they want to bring to a session. So one client, the first thing they wanted to decide was whether or not they should move back into the family home that they'd walked out of. You have to work with the client where they're at, but also I have a scaffold of things that I know that by the end of the time we've worked together, we will probably have addressed. And very early in that, with almost all my clients, will come values work. What is it that's really important to you? Who are you? What matters to you? And that can be really quite hard for some people because they've actually forgotten who they are. They've forgotten what's important to them.
Yeah. And I
So
think lots of people have never really taken that space ever to look at this work when I do it with my clients. And it's very difficult to go through on your own as well, because you almost need someone to do that sort of jujitsu with you and say, well, what exactly does that mean? What does
yeah.
that look like in reality? And very often people say, oh, excellence is my value. Is that great? But you ask 10 people what that means to them, and it's always completely different. So it's a very interesting story digging into that. And often you can see the interconnectivity of things that had been missed before and unlock different parts of your values or your personality that you had completely missed that were there. It's very exciting work, but I can imagine it's very rewarding for your clients.
Oh yeah, definitely. And actually one of the things that I'll often say to them is think about when you were a child, because very often our values are there if you go looking for them. That's often where they start, or particularly if you're trying to think about what you used to enjoy. Go back to what you used to enjoy as a child. And so many people will say to me, oh, I really loved it when I did something adventurous, or so when did you last do something adventurous? And then they'll go, well, I don't remember doing. So it's all of that. And I think alongside values very closely comes boundaries. I find a lot of my clients have issues with boundaries, not unsurprisingly.
Yeah, likewise here. We had a great discussion on the show with Tom Cleary, who was talking about self-compassion. And the more I do this work, the more I see that this self-compassion and self-care, as you were alluding to, is the root of success. But if you don't have that self-care and self-love and self-respect, then you won't put the right boundaries in place. You will just say yes to everything, and you'll never get back to what makes you happy and feeling fulfilled and living your values. It's just too easy to kind of blend into everyone else's life. So yeah, I can imagine your clients just feel so incredible after that. And most likely, I'm always thinking this myself, when even when you like move house and you tidy a room, think, oh, gosh, it's so much better like this. Why didn't I keep it tidy? And oh, why didn't I look at my values and my boundaries before? It's so much easier. Yeah, it must be so transformative for them.
Yeah, I think particularly the boundaries work. Recognizing that actually I've had really porous boundaries and that I can do something about that. I can change that. I can actually decide what my boundaries are and to put those in place. And I do a lot of role play with clients because that obviously links in with the work that I used to do at Cambridge. So, yeah.
I love that term, porous boundaries.
Yeah.
I think we've all had that from time to time. And in getting back this sense of control, one thing I see with business owners is that it's almost a bit of a trap because you can do anything. So you have full control in your business, but then, well, what do I do? And very often, particularly with a lot of the women that I work with, some of the men too, actually, they're still waiting for permission from someone, for someone else to say, yes, it's okay, you're allowed to do that now. And of course, there isn't anyone. We have to claim that for ourselves. But I think it can feel very vulnerable having that control, taking leadership of ourselves and our future. Do you find the same? Have you got any advice for someone who, in whatever respect in their life, is facing that challenge?
I guess what you're speaking about there is really ways to build resilience, isn't it? Yeah, I think any time where you are doubting yourself, it's about building that resilience. Would you agree?
Yeah, I think the resilience, and I guess it's belief, isn't it? Because confidence comes afterwards.
Yeah,
Once you've done something, then you feel confident that you could do it again, or you could do something else along those lines. But before that, we kind of need that trust in ourselves, that belief, and to take that leap. Say, okay, I think it's going to be okay. And look for examples in the past where they've done maybe,
absolutely.
yeah, they might not have done that exact thing before, but they can take the lessons from that and, well, I made that work, so therefore I could make this work, and start to look for those clues perhaps to build that belief to take that next step I don't know, how do you see that working?
I guess I take a slightly different tack on that, in that I think that one of the key kind of ways that I help my clients to build that trust is actually to focus on what has happened to them in the past. Because I believe that whatever we've gone through, if we can actually see it not as being a failure or not as, something that we regret, but actually something that we can learn from. So that idea of one door closing, that might be a major bereavement in your life. It might be a big project that collapsed. It might be someone rejecting you. I remember one of my key traumas and key moments in my life where there was definitely a period of significant learning was I had been working for about 6 months on developing a curriculum for nurse practitioners. It was one of the first courses in the country, and I took it extremely seriously. I was working long hours on this, and I was very stressed because I had very, very little support. And I was working very closely with the medical school, and that was kind of a bit against the sort of nurse education sort of approach. But they were the ones that I felt were kind of the role models in a way for what we were trying to do. And I went to a meeting, and that project was just cut in half in one meeting. And the outcome for me was that burnout that had been coming for a very long time hit me. And I went home and I slept for the best part of, I was off for 12 weeks, and I think I probably slept for most of 10. But that changed my life because it gave me that space, that time to question whether I wanted to stay in a nurse education, whether I could do anything else. And in fact, where were my real strengths? And 6 months later, I actually started my tenure with the University of Cambridge as a lecturer in clinical communication. And I stayed there for the next 10 years in a job that I absolutely loved. So I guess what I'm saying is I ask my clients to think about what happened in their life after that second door opened, and what would never have happened if that door hadn't closed. And thinking about that can be a great way of getting perspective on a current really tough time, because you can then go, well, I've got through that, so actually I can get through this. And what's more, I didn't just get through it, I actually grew through it, I learned from it. And you realize that actually these times in our lives they're put there for a reason. They're put there for us to learn to flourish through them. I know you saw my post last week where I was actually saying I'm in a bit of a sad place at the moment. And I think another part of how we build resilience is, strangely enough, I believe, is actually allowing us to sit with those feelings, allowing ourselves to acknowledge the emotions that we're experiencing, but to do so really mindfully. So,
Yes.
for example, one of my clients is in a really terrible situation where she'd been living in the spare bedroom for the last 2 years, having almost nothing to do with her husband. And then suddenly he moved his new partner into their home while she was still there.
No.
I mean, that's an extraordinary situation. And when she had her discovery call with me, she was like, I just don't know how to deal with this. And she was so angry and so hurt and in such a victim place. And I just said to her, do you feel ready to actually move beyond this at the moment? Because that's what my work is about. It's about helping someone to actually take the next step. And we agreed that she was going to take 3 months just to sit with that anger, that sadness, that guilt. But at the end of that time, then she would do whatever she needed to do to let go of it. So I believe that sometimes building resilience is that giving ourselves permission to sit with those emotions, but putting a time limit on it. And so, as a business owner, sometimes something comes along, we're really disappointed. It is about saying, well, am I going to allow myself 20 minutes to sit with this? Am I going to go for a walk? And when I come back, I'm going to put it, I genuinely think it's about acknowledging it, but also putting a time limit on it.
Yeah, I love that. And Clara, I can never remember her surname, makes the point that no one serves champagne at a pity party. And I love champagne, so I always remind myself of that. If something goes wrong, I was like, no, no one serves champagne at a pity party. And it helps snap me out of it. But also, my kids were in a film about feelings when they were small, and they were given these feeling magnets. And it's a brilliant kit because often we're feeling sad, but putting actual words to it to describe exactly how you're feeling, where has that come from, can really help you better acknowledge where you are. And so I'm always using their kit, even the kids one. I'm sure the adults one is even more helpful, just to say, well, I'm just disappointed right now. It's not sadness. I'm disappointed because I acted this way, or I knew I should have done that, or something was there. And I let myself down. I wasn't really living into my standards. And once you can really acknowledge what exactly that situation is and what that sadness is really telling you, then I found it much easier to accept that and move forward. It's like, great, now I know what the lesson is, I can move forward. And we had Orly on the show about a year ago now talking about habitude at work. That's her work. She does all of this positivity with companies. But she said it's not all about being happy all of the time. But as you say, having that space for those negative emotions and the feelings we have, because they're real, we have to acknowledge those, and having that space, identifying what that means and not judging them, not saying, oh, I'm sad, I should feel
Yeah.
a different way. And I think it's really powerful to do that. But I love the idea of putting a time limit on it. I think that can be really helpful. But if we deny our feelings, then I don't think that's going to take us down the right way either. Much better to, as you say, sit with that and really explore what that means for us and what it's going to take for us to move forward.
Yeah, because then you're in so much of a better place to focus on with my clients. It's on what shape they want their divorce to take, what commitment they want to make, what intention they want to have for their divorce, and particularly what can they control. And the advice I gave that particular lady was just go away and journal and just get it all out there. Really, as you say, unpick it. What is each of those emotions? I gave her that wonderful emotion wheel, which helps you to, as you say, identify exactly what it is you're experiencing. Because so many times we can put these huge emotions, whereas actually they're much more subtle than that, and getting to what's actually behind it. And when she came back 3 months later, she was ready to start to do the work, and just in such a different place.
Yeah, amazing the difference it can make when you give yourself that space, as you were saying. It's a gift we can give to ourselves.
Mm, mm, mm. And I think the other one for me, which really came through for me through my own divorce, was actually finding that sense of awe. So, whatever it is that you see or you experience, for me, it was being in the sea. When I was in the sea, I am every time blown away by how enormous it is, by the sound of the waves. Usually brings out the kid in me as I jump in the waves. And for other people, it might be a special part of nature. It might be an overwhelming act of kindness. It might be a light bulb moment. It doesn't matter what it is, but it gives you that sense of awe, and it allows you to relive that moment. You close your eyes, you're really mindful, you remember as much about that experience as you can. What did you hear? What did you see? What did you feel? And through that, you can really focus on those emotions. And as you're reimagining it, you can actually think about the additional positive feelings that you'll have. And I think when you're in a challenging space, I think giving yourself that opportunity to remember what that sense of awe is really.
Yeah, I love that. And that's really a sort of a tool you can keep in your back pocket anytime.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Powerful. I want to come back right to the very beginning of our discussion. And you were saying about how you've been a nurse, how you've been in academia, and now you're a divorce coach. You were helping brides with body confidence. There is a thread, but one thing I see with a lot of people starting their business is they're doing something very new, or it feels very new, and they forget all the wonderful things they've done in the past. And actually, there is a lot of skill and connections and wisdom locked in their previous experiences, almost like they've drawn a line, they're starting afresh, and oh my gosh, I don't know anything. Most of my clients, when we start working together, they quickly realize, oh, actually, I do have a lot of the knowledge I need to succeed. I do know more about sales and marketing than I thought, because life is sales and marketing, if we're honest, you know. So once they can unlock that, they suddenly feel a lot more confident taking those next steps. And then it's just fine-tuning the strategies, making that all work. So I was wondering how you have managed to do that. Was it something that was natural for you, or did you have to take some time to think, what tools do I already have in my toolkit to help me succeed in this next path?
Well, I think, as I said to you, my body confidence coaching business was a bit of a lesson in many ways. And I think what I did was, going into this business, I don't feel like I've had that many surprises, because I had learned that business is a roller coaster. And the way you manage that. So, as an example, I will have clients who I do a discovery call with, and they will say, yes, yes, I definitely want to start, and send me the contract. And then I get a message saying, I had this week, then I get a message saying, actually, I think I need to think about this a bit longer, and the fear has kicked in. And what's really important for me is that I know my numbers. So I don't focus on the outcome of any one particular call. I know that as long as I'm doing X number of discovery calls, my conversion rate is this, and therefore I will always have the clients that I want. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So I think that has helped me to understand that business is a roller coaster. I think, in terms of your question, I honestly think when I set up this business, I had worked out that this was actually how I was going to be able to pull all my expertise together. I think things fell into place very, very quickly for me. It was literally the conversation with my solicitor. 2 weeks later, I'd discovered the Divorce Coaching Academy. 2 weeks after that, I'd started my training. And it was like it was meant to be. And I think one of the things that I learned with the body confidence business that I had was that I wasn't listening to my intuition. Everything was telling me that this wasn't the right thing for me to be doing. If I think about the fact that even writing a social media post felt like such hard work, felt like I was pushing a heavy stone up a hill. Whereas, now I'll be having my breakfast and I'll write a post in my head. The difference is enormous. When you are in that flow, when you are where you are meant to be, everything in my intuition was telling me I wasn't in the right place, but I just wasn't listening.
Yeah. And sometimes it takes some of these wrong turns to help us trust that intuition, to prove to us that we do have the ability to make these right decisions. And we were talking about that earlier, like rebuilding that trust in ourselves.
Yeah.
So you've covered so much. It's been wonderful. Are there any other pieces of advice that you would like to give to other women starting a business or building a business that you feel we haven't touched on?
Yeah, I absolutely love Eric Hanson's poem. There is freedom waiting for you on the breezes of the sky, and you ask, what if I fall? Oh, but my darling, what if you fly? When we're worried about failing, think of all the times when you actually have succeeded. And I think that just captures that whole thing we were talking about, lessons. And then have a not to do list. I think this is really important. I use this with clients, often in senior positions, who are taking that long list home. What's the goal? Not to work at the weekend. What are the distractions? Responding to work messages when my status says I'm busy, etc., etc. So having that not to do list, I think, is really important. And the other one that I absolutely love is using video. So if a client reaches out for me for help, first of all, I ask to myself, do I need to respond to this immediately? But actually, if I decide to, then responding with a video or with a voice message, but usually with a video, it's immediate, it's personal, it makes them feel valued, but it's also very time efficient for your business. It's done, it's done. So yeah, I love using video.
Yeah, I use that a lot with my clients as well, with Loom, for example, and they're like, what am I missing? My LinkedIn post isn't working or whatever. And then I can actually pull it up and say, well, look at this. As you say, it's very personal, but it's done in minutes and it's much more powerful as a response. So yeah, I love using that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
definitely.
fantastic. So Sally, you've taken us through your journey. You have explained what you're doing now and the extraordinary help that you provide for women going through this awful time in their life where it can feel like the world is ending, but you show them it's not, there's hope, and it can be much better on the other side even. What's next for Sally Jackson?
I'm going to be running a retreat in Spain, in Banyoles in Spain, in May the 31st next year, alongside Julia Moreno, who is a lawyer and also a coach. It's going to be wonderful in terms of looking after well-being, in terms of relaxation, but actually they're also going to leave with an action plan. So I'm very excited about that.
That sounds wonderful. I almost want to get divorced now so I can come. Perhaps I'll find a yoga retreat instead. Sally, thank you so much for sharing all of your wisdom today. It's been such a great conversation, and there's so much you've shared. I think if people listen to this a couple of times, they'll still be taking more lessons away. If people want to know more about you and your work and to perhaps continue the conversation, where's the best place for them to find you?
They can go to my website, which is www.sallyjacksoncoaching.com, or they can find me on LinkedIn, or email me at sally@sallyjacksoncoaching.com.
Perfect. Sally, thank you so much for your time today.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us today on the Driven Female Entrepreneur podcast. Didn't Sally just share so many incredible takeaways? Come and let me know what your biggest takeaway was in the Dream Clients Club on school.com. That's school with a K. And if you enjoyed the show, then please do leave a review. It helps other people to find all the wisdom that's contained within all of these episodes. And of course, do feel free to share it with your network and business besties. There are a lot more tools, tips, and insights coming up for you in the next episode, so don't miss next week's podcast. Or better still, subscribe now so you never miss your weekly dose of inspiration. I'm Melitta Campbell, your business coach and value whisperer, and I look forward to meeting you in the next episode. But before I do, I would love to extend a little invitation to you. As we draw close to the end of the year and the beginning of the new year, I have opened up a few spots in my diary to help listeners of this show to start planning out their best marketing strategy for 2024. This is a 45-minute call with me. We'll look at where your business is today, what your goals are for next year, and what makes sense for you in terms of your resources, your personality, your goals, your business, your clients, all of this great stuff. And I'll help you start to put together the beginnings of a marketing plan to take you forward in 2024. If you would like to book one of those calls, you want to go to my Calendly page. So you'll find that at calendly.com/MelittaCampbell/2024. So do feel free to go and book one of those complimentary sessions with me. And I look forward to helping you shape an exciting 2024 for you and your business. Meantime, I will see you in next week's show. Have a great week.